I think it's like one of those things where you can only love what you know, right? But then as you love it, you want to know it more. And then as you know it more, you fall more in love with it. And then, it's just,
A
yeah. So
beautiful
is that,
cycle.
yeah, yeah. Like sometimes we have negative cycles, this is a positive one. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our series on the Eucharistic pilgrimage with St. Ephrem. Father Joby, myself are here as usual, but we also have two special guests. We have Sruthi and Noah. So welcome, guys. How are you all doing?
Doing
Good.
well. How are you?
Doing well.
We're doing good. Father Joby, did you make any progress on all those books behind you in the interim?
No, not at all.
Nice.
Not at all.
Nice. Good.
They're just there for show, collecting dust.
So, Father Joby and I have been meditating together on St. Ephrem's hymns on the unleavened bread, and it's been, at least personally, very fruitful. And I've been hearing from some people how it's been helpful, and we're winding that portion up. Where we're going to stick with St. Ephrem, but we're going to wind up on that particular hymn cycle. And so we thought to bring you guys on today, Sruthi and Noah, to ask if you would share a little bit about your own experiences of the Eucharist, right? So from the very beginning of Christian faith, personal witness testimony has been like the modus operandi of faith. And so I think that will be very helpful and enriching for us. But just as like a little recap, some of the stuff that we've been talking about, and Father Joby, feel free to chime in here, based on St. Ephrem, is the Eucharist as this Passover meal, the new Passover, and how it celebrates and affects and marks the transition, the liberation from slavery to new life and freedom, the conquering of the ancient enemy of the human race that was first symbolized in Pharaoh in Egypt, and then so in the same way that the Israelites being brought into the Promised Land symbolized our new life in Jesus Christ. And so it's been beautiful and powerful, and a few other things too, like God's meekness, but power in meekness, concealed in meekness, and all kinds of stuff like that we've been reflecting on, and also God's concreteness, in the Eucharist in particular, how He's so really present to us and accessible to us in the Eucharist.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think even just like the title that we have even for this little mini series of sorts, right, like a pilgrimage or like a journey, and recognizing and saying that even the Eucharist itself is our companion, right? Because it is Jesus. He is our companion on this journey of life, and we have a destination, ultimately paradise, right, which is our ultimate and end goal. So yes, while the hymns of unleavened bread sort of tracked that journey, as you said, Father Thomas, from slavery into freedom through the Exodus narrative, or through that larger metaphor, meta narrative there for us. But I think there is a very tangible thing of, as us being Christians, being born and brought up here and living in 2025, we still partake of that journey in our own way, and our journey is ultimately to heaven.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a pilgrimage through time, through history. Yeah. And we're part of that. So coming to you guys, how about we start with you, Sruthi? Could you share a little bit about your own experience of the Eucharist, and just how the Lord has touched your life, your heart through the Eucharist?
Sure. I can say that I think there is both an emotional and an intellectual side of me that the Lord has reached me. I would say one time, when I was probably around 8th grade, I was in adoration. It was a very Steubenville style adoration where the monstrance is brought in front of me, and to really understand something like just like clicked in me in that moment that, like this is the God of the universe and he is standing in front of me. And it was a very humbling moment for me to understand like how great of a God he is. And I have this luxury of kneeling before him. So I think that was a very important moment in my life to understand what is actually the Eucharist. I think from then on, it was this more intellectual side where we had CCD, and one of our lessons was about the Qurbana, and it was talking about all like the actual parts and pieces. What does a bema mean? What does an matbaha mean? All of these little meanings. And I am a nerd, so I thought all of this is so cool. It's not just watching this hour-long service go on. There's actually a meaning from the beginning to the end. And I think learning more and more about it, it was like, I can't get enough. So I think my love of Qurbana has even made me fall more in love with the Eucharist, to know like, wow, what a beautiful piece of art that we get to, really experience. So I think like there's just been beautiful moments in Qurbana and adoration that have really shaped my desire for the Eucharist.
That is awesome. The 8th grade, is that what you said?
Yes, I would say that retreat was in 8th grade.
Yeah, those like personal experiences of Jesus. I don't know. Do you remember like what happened there in that moment? You said you had this awareness that this was the God of the universe. How did that? Yeah.
So I actually came to help out at the retreat. My family is very full of like retreat helpers. I have been a cradle Catholic my whole life. And so I think by accident almost, I came to help out with retreats, and I kind of almost lost that personal touch. I never really sat and experienced. And so it was one of those retreats where, you're just running around, you're helping out. But like I said, it was a Steubenville style adoration, and the priest is moving with the monstrance through the crowd. And obviously I'm sitting in the back row because that's where all the cool kids are. And I think it was just like a light switch almost. Because I think in my heart, I was praying that everyone else that is attending the street, like let them feel the love of the Lord. Because, I love the Lord. I have been taught to love the Lord my whole life. But I think the minute the priest stood before me, I was like, I also should, like, I also am worthy of this love. I also want to fall in love with this Lord. And who is this Lord? He's this Lord that's standing in the monstrance before me, right? So I think it was just almost by accident, or maybe obviously not accident, but this light switch moment where it's, wow, this is the Eucharist. And yeah.
There is so much in what you've just said that I'm super interested in, or rather that is super interesting. Like one thing that you talked about is the interplay between knowledge, understanding, a kind of intellectual conversion or transformation, and that of like the heart, I guess you could say, right? And that they're both important. And you sort of go back and forth. Like maybe before the 8th grade, it seems like you already knew growing up that this is Jesus, that this is the Eucharist, right? Or the Eucharist is Jesus, I mean, and his real presence. But in a way that could just be knowledge, and some of it could also be piety, I guess you could say, in the positive sense of the word. But then a movement of the heart, right? It just changes everything for you. It changes actually the course of your whole life there in that encounter. It begins something which continues, right? A journey. But then your mind, wants more of what you love. So I think it's like one of those things where you can only love what you know, right? But then as you love it, you want to know it more. and then as you know it more, you fall more in love with it, and then it's just
A
So
beautiful
is that
cycle.
yeah, yeah. Like sometimes we have negative cycles. This is a positive one. It's just kind of spiraling up, I guess you could say. And is that ongoing in your life right now?
I would say so. Like, I think, again, after learning about the Qurbana, it's to make sure I actively participate. And when you actively participate, there's so many graces that you receive from that. And then to like hear and research and understand stories about, oh wow, these are actual miracles of science that have happened during the Holy Mass. Like, I think it's just like this growing culmination, and to see where even the Eucharist takes me. Because of my love for the Qurban, I feel like I've gotten the luxury again to experience so many beautiful moments. So it is not because of me. I'm just a girl from Chicago. And so it really is the Lord and my love for the Eucharist, I would say, that has brought me and to let me learn more about him.
That is awesome. Yeah. The other thing that I was interested in too, in what you said, actually, there's a couple, but a couple of things. How you went there to help out. I find that interesting that a lot of times people may assume that, okay, you're helping in the church, you're involved in the ministry in some way, you're part of DYA leadership or Jesus Youth leadership or Shalom or whatever ministry, and so you're kind of part of the givings team, and that's just so far from the truth. I mean, a lot of times we start getting involved in helping out of a general sense, like a goodwill or something like that. I mean, there's some orientation towards God and church and stuff like that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we've had even a personal encounter, yet. I mean, people can be at all different places, and so you go there to help out, but then there's a moment where you realize that, wait, this is for me. Jesus, he's for me. Like, I think you said that I'm worthy of his love. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
That's profound, right? And so many of us who serve in the church, sometimes we can lose that or lose sight of that, or we may have never actually gone there. So we're serving, we're involved in all these leadership things and organizing retreats and big things. Meanwhile, inside, we don't really personally know or believe that we are worthy of his love ourselves, right? And so whether we're somebody really involved in the church or we're someone who doesn't even come to church, the invitation from Jesus in the Eucharist is the same, right? It's actually to receive his love the same. And I don't think there's probably hardly a difference between the two, at least as much of a difference as it would seem to us, before his eyes, right? Yeah. So, and I think there is the last thing that I wanted to ask you about, which is about the Qurbana specifically, but maybe we'll come back to that. How about you, Noah? What could you share a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, yeah. So I would say that for me, I guess my experience with the Eucharist, it wasn't so much of a moment, I would say. I know, Sruthi, you mentioned like light bulb. And I guess it's funny, that's something that um, I've heard in a lot of other people, testimonies, growing up, like these individual moments where, they felt the presence of the Lord, and it's so beautiful. And I've always like desired like that sort of encounter with the Lord. Uh, but for me, it was a little different. And I guess like where I can start with the National Eucharistic Congress that took place in summer of 2024, and I wasn't even supposed to go to that. Like I only got to go just like a family friend offered to take me up, and I was like, okay, I'll go. And like a whole bunch of like little coincidences that stacked up on top of each other that allowed me to go in the first place. And the Eucharistic Congress, so I think it was so it's so cool. That's the one word. There's so many people there, like thousands and thousands, like dozens of thousands, I think 65,000 people gathered there, right? And every day we'd start the day off with a mass. And I've been a cradle Catholic, right? I grew up, my parents were pretty devout. So I'd go through the motions, and the idea of the Eucharist it was always like a reality for me, in my mind, at least. Like, if someone asked me, like, do you believe that Jesus is really like present in the Eucharist? I could probably say yes, knowing that, okay, it makes sense that this is what the church teaches, that this piece of bread is Jesus himself. But I don't think I ever like believe that fully with my heart, so to speak. I knew it intellectually. I think you guys mentioned that earlier, right? About having this knowledge of the Eucharist. And so that's kind of how I was, that's like the state I was at with Eucharistic Congress. And one of the cool things for me was one of like I still remember the feeling. And it was during Mass, just the sheer amount of people that were there. So after we had all like received Eucharist, and we're all just like sitting in this stadium, and I can like open my eyes and look around at like these thousands of other people who also believe the same thing as me. It was so I want to say like convicting for me. Like, okay, like, these clearly there's something going on here that is so much more profound than like a simple understanding of the reality of the Eucharist, right? And there was this silence, while we were all just like after receiving the Eucharist, and that was so beautiful for me. And seeing so many people there, I remember reflecting back on it and thinking, okay, so when I go to Mass, this is a fraction of what it actually looks like. There's this picture that I've seen before. I think it's a painting or something, and it's a depiction of what actually happened during the Mass, right? And I think it's like it shows like heaven and earth kind of like coming together, and maybe you guys have seen it before, but it was, I don't know, that was the first time for me to like see that in person, my own eyes, like, wow, like this is what happens every time I go to Mass. Like, sure, these are all other human beings, but every time I go to Mass, all of heaven is united with earth, in that specific moment, all the angels and all the saints, they're all there. And so Congress was like the beginning of a slow, very, very slow but subtle but noticeable transformation in my Eucharistic life. And so after Congress was my second semester at college, my second year, and so I'd finally gotten a car and everything, and I just found that my Wednesdays were a lot more free, and I found myself being able to go to Mass, to confession, to adoration, and I just knock these three things out like every Wednesday, and it just became like a very solid habit for that entire semester. And I don't think like a year before Congress or a year before like that, just like experience of like the Mass and the Eucharist, and especially in the midst of like so many other believers who also had like a strong conviction about their faith. I don't think before that I would have been able to like make that sort of commitment. It was almost as if after going to Congress, after getting a taste, so to speak, of heaven, of the Eucharist, like all these like streams of grace were like made so much more available to me. I think that
I'm so
was
happy to hear you share this. I mean, especially that the fruit of it was ongoing for you. You kept going to Mass and confession, adoration.
Yeah.
And we had some time ago before the Congress, we had Bishop Cousins. He came down here and we had a little interview with him. I had an interview with him, and the Congress really wasn't just like a project. Like, oh, okay, there was a sense in prayer coming from many different like religious orders and just a lot of prayerful people that it was time for a Eucharistic revival across the United States, and that the Congress would be part of that. But there's many more things like our own diocesan Eucharistic Congress is coming up, which is all kind of part of that whole revival process. And you're living proof of the inspiration that all those people had, in the spirit.
Yeah.
Because it's and obviously many more people. The whole church really was renewed through that here in the United States. So, that's beautiful. Similar. I don't know about you, Father Joby, but again, a lot of things coming up in my mind as you're speaking. A lot of interest in some of the things that you said.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thanks, Noah, for sharing. One of the things that I really like that you said, and something I was been thinking about recently, is how so often, like, we can know something to be true. So, for example, like you're, being surrounded by so many believers at the Congress, and just really just being like this sort of like overwhelming experience of, wow, there's like thousands and thousands of people, and we're all here worshiping God at this mass, right? And so that how like the magnitude of that, I think, is just it's overwhelming. It's kind of, I think, a similar experience you hear people when they go to like World Youth Day, right? Like somehow or another, like, yeah, it's like you go to mass every Sunday, but when you go to World Youth Day, somehow just being at this like several million people mass just kind of gives this new invigoration um of how powerful like the worship is. And even like today during Kurbana, like there's certain words or certain things that just like strike me, how like, for example, the hymn of remembrance, like, the priest goes up to the altar, he just, covered the gifts which are going to be our Lord's precious body and blood, and he comes back to the bema, right? And he pretty much, it feels like we're just like rallying all of heaven, right? And just saying like, glory be to the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Let it be the commemoration of Mary, the Mother of God, St. Joseph. And then you're calling all the angels, apostles, friends of the Lord, St. Thomas. You're calling all of our deceased loved ones, like all who have gone forth in the sign of faith. And it's like, it's almost like as we're calling them to mind and remembering them, I could kind of almost imagine, I'm just like, oh, I see them just popping up all over the congregation. Like, they're all here with us. Or when we get to like the second Gehenna prayer, like there's that phrase, like thousands upon thousands of holy angels, right? Just like, and just thinking like this place is being flooded by heaven, right? And so I think that sometimes it takes like the very physical, concrete experience of like the Congress or World Youth Day for us to have that realization. But like even in a mass where there's only like the priest and like one person in the congregation, in reality, like the plenitude of heaven is there, right?
I feel like the chapel, Mar Ephraim Chapel, that you, Father Joby, that you kind of put together represents that, right? You've got all these different saints that you've added everywhere. I mean, I don't remember exactly, it's been a while, but
that was the
got,
vision behind it, really. That
yeah,
was the vision behind it. It was really to show like, because it was all our young ones that were there, and really to say like, kind of going off of Ephraim's sort of like theology in some senses of just like, we are journeying towards paradise. So here is like creation and paradise right up front, but along the sides, right? Along the sides are the different saints that are all accompanying us there with us in this celebration, right? So exactly, it's not just the earthly church, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's also, as you both pointed out, it's also not just this particular community, like, which is such an important awareness for us to have as Catholics. You went to the Eucharistic Congress. You had this one experience of the thousands and the thousands, but your heart was taken to the reality that in every Eucharist, you're united with all of these people and beyond, and you're united with the angels and saints in heaven. And that's such an important awareness for us to have as Catholics all the time, right?
Yeah.
like one of the things we reflected on from Mar Ephraim was the distinction he makes between people singular and peoples plural. Whenever he talks about the New Testament, he talks about peoples, because when you read the Old Testament, you have this idea of a people, a chosen people. It's one tribe, one family, actually, because they're all descendants of Abraham. It's one family. But then you get to the New Testament, it's no longer one family. The faith has now been proclaimed to the ends of the earth from the beginning. Even from the very beginning, it's proclaimed to the ends of the earth, and it's all peoples coming together. And so, thank you for sharing that, because that's actually such an essential aspect of Eucharist, is that it at this meal. I forget exactly how Jesus says it, but he says, like, people from the east and the west, will come to the table, right, to the banquet. Speaking of the Eucharistic feast, so yeah, that's awesome that you had that experience, and it's ongoing for you as well.
Yeah, for sure. I would say that I know I mentioned at the beginning it wasn't a sort of light bulb moment, but it definitely was pivotal for me, I would say. And like Congress was one thing, the experience of Congress was one thing, and then that deepening of that, like that Eucharistic desire, especially through the months that followed, it only continued. I mean, like even now, I think even ever since that, I would say that like uh, it's so much more. The reality of the Eucharist is so much more like striking to me. It's not so much of a like a it's not merely like a belief that I can say I stand by now. That's like this is something that I get to participate in. This is something that I get to experience. I like even adoration alone. Like like aside from mass, like I've been able to just kind of like, realize like, oh my goodness, like I am the mere act of me like standing before the Eucharist in adoration, that itself is sanctifying. And I remember hearing once, like just I think it's like Father Mike Schmidt said this, but it's like every time like you receive the Eucharist, it's like 10,000 nuclear bombs. Like that's like he's using an analogy here, right? But like the immense power, like the goodness that you are receiving every time you receive the Eucharist. It may not feel like it all the time. Now that's the hard part. But gosh, getting a taste of that, finally beginning to have a better understanding of that is very, very uh, profound for me. Yeah.
Yeah, immense power concealed, and sometimes we're more aware of the power, and sometimes we're kind of there with Jesus in the humility of his self-expression. But something that we can notice from both of your stories, which are both beautiful, in terms of how the journey began. One is at Steubenville, and the other is at the National Eucharistic Congress. And I mean, I don't. You could say it's like a sampling error or whatever. This is anecdotal, but I feel like for a lot of our young people, right, faith really gets ignited through something like, or Father Joby, you mentioned World Youth Day. I mean, how many young people, young Catholics, their faith gets ignited through World Youth Days. Though my faith journey didn't begin at a World Youth Day, it played a very pivotal role the first World Youth Day I went to. I mean, without that, I'm not even sure if I would still be, in the church and still be Catholic, because I started looking into Christianity and all that stuff, and I started going on Google and finding all these different Protestant sources and all that stuff, So I don't know, that there is something interesting to that, right? And part of it is, I think, the people's thing. Like, we need to in some way experience the universality of the church. We can't just be in this little group of people, and I just don't think that works, right? So that's part of it, but there might also be something more, which is not commonly addressed or acknowledged, and like aesthetics. kind of like the experiential. I mean, we all know that Jesus is in the Eucharist, regardless of where that Eucharist is reserved, right? It could be
Right.
just in the most like, um, rundown church in a tiny tabernacle somewhere or whatever. It's still the same Jesus, completely Jesus. When we go to some retreats and events and things like that, where first of all, they're designed to help stimulate our faith, to kind of awaken us, maybe asking good questions or listening to different inspiring talks. It kind of predisposes us to the mystery more, right? So I think that's an important part of it. And then music, art, architecture. Yeah, I mean, I think we can't ignore those things. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that, Father Thomas. I actually just had a conversation with a young adult the other day who I think everyone's kind of trying to figure out this $1 million question of how do we get people to really understand and really return in the droves back to the church, or really just take their faith life seriously. And the solution was, if we just have a really awesome choir, it will solve the problem. Or if we just really change up the altar area and make it look super beautiful, it'll change everything. And then I think it was the Holy Spirit, but I just kind of made a quick comment and just said, well, think about some of our conferences that we've held, or these retreats. They're in these run down, kind of dumpy looking, not very pretty looking halls, right? Little cabin-y kind of halls and stuff. And they're not super aesthetic, but there is something to say the Spirit works there, right? So sometimes it is but at the same time you can go to think about all the people that flock to these various beautiful cathedrals in Europe, right? And they seem to have a sense of God through the beauty there. So there are different avenues, but it seems like in these different avenues, maybe the better thing is, how do we get the person, right, the soul, to be open, to be disposed, regardless of what the avenue is, whether it be intellectually, whether it be aesthetics, whether it be, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah. I would, to add on to that, I guess one of the harder things is after going to these events and these programs and these bigger experiences, so to speak, when there's a lot of people there and you're surrounded by so many other people who just believe the same thing as you, and there's good music and the lighting is really helping all of your humanity kind of focus in on the Eucharist, or when you don't have all that and you're back home and now you have the choice of, hey, am I going to get up and go to mass next morning? And it might not have all the the flashiest lights and amazing beautiful choir, but am I willing to sit down and can I consider that, hey, the same Jesus that was present that at that big experience or whatever it might have been, is that same Jesus, that same Jesus is present even in a church that might not have all these outer expressions of beauty, you were talking about Father Joby. But yeah, that's something even for me is now still kind of hard. But I think at the same time, all of the Eucharist, it is called a mystery for a reason. There's only so much understanding we can have about it, and there's only so much we can make sense of it, and there's only so many connections and logical conclusions we can make about it before it's just impossible for us to grasp. But yeah.
I think
My
that's
brother, I hear you.
so funny. Sorry, go ahead, Joby.
No, go. I think I'm very quickly. I think what you said, Noah, is just so true. I think about just like right after coming from a retreat. Usually, this happens is like retreats usually go the whole weekend, but because you're a priest in the parish, like we always have to dip like by Saturday because we have to run back to the parish on Sunday, and we have these like epic, epic like setups and stuff that they'll have like on Friday and Saturday, and emotions and tears and lights and fire and all the like the praise and worship, everything going, and it's like amazing. Then you go on Sunday, and it's kind of like the routine. I'm gonna go back to kind of like the sort of thing, and I'm just like, and so it's so easy to just kind of go on autopilot. At least I do go on autopilot, and I've had this experience way more often than I would like to admit, where just things just go on autopilot, and then it comes to that point, like for me, where it comes to the Corbuna, where we spread will not die, where your mission is attain salvation and live forever, and I like raise it up and the bell rings, and then I like just like look up for a moment. And then you hear like, I am the living bread which comes from heaven. And then as I bring him down, I'm just kind of like, I'm really sorry that I've been zoning out and like not realizing like that is like, this is something kind of amazing, right? Like,
Right.
not kind of, it is amazing, right? It's just amazing to think that like, yes, the same Jesus that was just so like palpable like hours ago at some other place is like he's here still too, right? Like he doesn't just leave us,
Right.
like even in the mundane he's still here, right?
Yeah, I think I wanted to say, like, my experience at National Eucharistic Congress almost mirrors what you were saying, Joby. You know, I got asked to, put up a choir for the first ever, Holy Qurbana that's being done at such a national level. And it was very intimidating to me, but I was like, we have so many talented people in our diocese. We can put together a great team. And then they came back and told me we could only have a choir of like 10 to 11 people. And that was like probably the scariest thing that they could have told me at that moment. 3 months before, how can you tell me that I can only have a choir of 10 people? We need to represent a whole rite that has not been seen in such a, national level. And so with my choir, my little kids, I had one kid, one of my my violin player, she's only 15 years old, and she's standing in front of all of these people, and I think it was such a beautiful moment. And this Qurbana happens and is definitely the peak of my life. And as a choir director, I had to leave and I had to go to Qurbana at the cathedral back on Sunday. So I drove back, I left the Congress. And on Sunday, since all my choir is still at the Congress, I was left with just my little angel choir, which are my third graders. And it was so shocking to me. Like, one day I'm standing in front of 60,000 people, and we're sharing our Qurbana with so many people. And wow, like what an amazing moment. But then the next day was just with my third graders, just me and the 5 other people in the congregation. And it was the same Qurbana. It's almost shocking how, it's the Lord is here and there and everywhere, and we get to be a part of that. So I just think it's someone that worries about aesthetics, the Lord works in mysterious ways.
We're gonna need to get some inside scoop of what this choir story was like, because you guys sounded wonderful, by the way. I know that in Long Island we have a number of, even like the small kids, like I think we have this one little tyke who's 2 years old, who without a doubt he listens to that playlist on repeat at home. Like we don't sing Kadisha at Long Island, but that kid knows Kadisha. Like he like sings it to me, so
No, but you guys are really hitting on something really, really important, and Father Joby, when you were describing that, I mean, as a priest, that happens pretty often because you're the main celebrant in terms of the liturgy, the sacrament, but you're also the person in charge of just everything going on, like earlier today, I was in another town and, there we had a parish retreat, and the beginning of the Qurbana is this one kid, he's got an empty Cheetos bag and he's just blowing into it and then crumpling it back up, blowing into it and I'm just like trying to concentrate. And, and then a couple of minutes later, this other kid spills a whole bunch of those little, what are those things called? Those fish things? Little fish snack things?
Goldfish.
Goldfish. across the whole floor. I'm like, so, but in the midst of all of that, you, and look, in an answer to your question, no, I think the answer to your question is actually liturgy, right? Because we have these amazing, like euphoric experiences, and that's rightly so. I mean, that's the way life is in general too, right? It's not like life is like this steady thing all the time. There's certain moments of time that are like really intense, and the same goes with our faith journey, with Eucharistic encounter. But liturgy is something that is repetitive. It's like a rhythm that takes you deeper and deeper and deeper across days and across months and years and decades and centuries as a church. It takes us deeper into the mystery and even into the silence, and that's another thing, which I think we need to foster more silence in our liturgies. But so that in the end, it's just like Father Joby was describing, it's just you, the Eucharist, and the whole people of God in silent adoration of the Lamb. Like I think I was on a retreat somewhere, and I had this, like a silent retreat, it was just no talks or anything like that, just in prayer. And I remember this moment of realization where it hit me that if I lost everything in life, and I know this would be true for any of us here and many others, but if I lost everything in life and I was stripped away of just everything, the only things that I would want that I would ask for is the Eucharist. Like if I have the Eucharist, that I just knew that I would be fulfilled every day in the Eucharist. And specifically as a priest, if I was able to celebrate the Eucharist every day, praying for myself, my own salvation and that of the world, there's just something so infinite in the Eucharist that in the midst of like that kid blowing into that Cheetos bag and everything, like goldfish everywhere, it's like you're still drawn in to the infinite love, the tenderness of God in the Eucharist, right? That's the great gift. Yeah. So, I mean, you guys were talking about the Kurbana in different ways, both of you. And actually, Sruthi, you said that, you said the Kurbana, but like you had that experience in 8th grade, but then as you started delving deeper into the Kurbana, it actually deepened your Eucharistic faith, right? Could you say more about that whole journey?
Yeah. So growing up, as I said, my family's very Catholic. So I did learn a lot from them. So in my quest to learn more about the Qurbana, I actually turned to my uncle, and he gave me books and taught me all that I could about the Qurbana. And I think in my quest and understanding of what's happening, I wanted to know how much more could I actively participate. And that road kind of led me to choir. And so in that, I learned of what a big responsibility I could have in this sacrifice. So I think from there, like, I can't even imagine how much more I've fallen in love with the Lord. So I've learned not only, what does the prayers we say, what do the songs that we sing mean, but then to also understand the effect that it has on our lives as well.
Yeah, I think when Noah was talking about the angels and the heavenly reality too, and I was thinking like, well, our Kurbana is sort of perfect for that, because we really emphasize that sort of like the seamless integration of heaven and earth, right? The heavenly choirs with the earthly choirs and stuff, right?
Yeah, when the priest calls upon the cherubim and the seraphim, I'm like, oh, am I here in those ranks? Like, am I here standing on the questroma? Like, this is actually happening. Like, we are in a beautiful heaven meets earth situation. Like, time is standing still. Like this is crazy. Like we're in like a wormhole almost, where like no, time doesn't exist, space doesn't exist. Like we are just here with God, and I think it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
It is. There's
Good.
no. I was just gonna say there's a silent prayer that the priest says at that time too, which goes on with that. I don't know if I can remember it off the top of my head, but it's like enjoying the hymns of us who are feeble with the praises of the seraphim and the right. Isn't that how it goes, Father Joby?
Yeah,
Seraphim
and really
Cherubim.
praising that, like praising God for uniting. Like there's a line that I really like that's like, you essentially are thanking God for uniting the inhabitants of heaven and earth,
That's right. Yeah.
right? And it's just like thinking, just like to me, that's where it's just like wow, like everyone's here, right? We're all here. All the inhabitants are here.
Now I don't know when this episode is going to come out, but at least where we're at right now, we're getting ready for um, the Holy Week and Holy Thursday, which will be a great opportunity for us to really just give thanks to the Lord for the gift of the Eucharist. And yeah, like it's easy as I think Noah, as you pointed out, it can be easy for us to like just go to the Eucharist, go to Mass, go to Kurbana, but not be mindful of the mystery, right? Or not as mindful as we can. And so certainly Holy Thursday is a good opportunity for us to rekindle that in our hearts with great gratitude. But I thought maybe just on a closing note, if I was curious about how you all, what you do to help you to stay in the mystery. Right. So as you're going to, however often you go to Kurbana weekly or daily or a few days a week, I mean, yeah, like what helps you to stay present, to be attuned? Like even at this retreat that I'm just coming from, a lot of the young people, the teens, were saying that because I asked them what is their desire for Lent in terms of growing closer to God, and a lot of them actually said, I really want to pay more attention in the Kurbana. I want to just receive more in that sense by being more attentive. Yeah, I don't know. Any thoughts from you all on that?
Yeah. I think one thing that you mentioned was like it's very repetitive, right? Like the Mass, Kurbana. Like we go every Sunday. Some of us, even more than that for daily masses and stuff. And so as with anything, like when it becomes like a habit or it becomes it's just like a part of our everyday like routine or this sort of thing, it's easy to like overlook. And that's, even beyond just like the mass, that applies to a lot of other things in our lives. Like for like students listening in, go to lectures and listening to your teachers, and it's so easy to let that stuff just kind of like go in one ear and out the other, literally, right? But I think one really cool thing for me has always been just like there's so much going on in any given moment during the Mass or Kurbana, right? Like this, the Eucharist is the source and summit of our faith, and even the all of Mass itself, like the idea of here we are, like offering Jesus back up to the to the Father, and we're like reliving like Calvary, like Sruthi, how you mentioned like Mass was like timeless, right? Like that's one of the reasons why like we are. You can't even say like we're time traveling. It's not time travel. It's not a like a reproduction. It's not like a silly skit. Like that is Calvary itself, like brought back, and something about that, just I think it's only human for us to to get distracted and for our mind to wander. But the one thing that I try to do is like when I find myself being distracted and just like off, just thinking random things, I just try to bring myself back to like what is happening in the Mass, like this prayer that I'm saying. What does it signify? What biblical connections does it have? Like what are the words coming out of my mouth, right? And if I don't know, that's just it's usually like it's been a great way for me to like, hey, maybe I need to do more research about like what this portion of the Mass represents, right? Like everything that we do in Mass, like songs, the words that we say, and the specific order and tradition, and all of these things. This is stuff that's been refined over the course of like hundreds of years, like over 2,000 years, right? So there is a very specific intentional reason behind the way that we do these certain things. And sometimes bringing our minds back to that is the best thing we can do, even despite like the distractions and stuff. Because like we're always going to get those temptations and those distractions. But the important thing is that, hey, like I'm not going to like dwell and stay in those. I'm just kind of like try and do my best to reorient myself back to like the mystery that the Mass is, you know? But yeah, just bringing myself back, trying to at least. That's definitely one thing.
And I think it's
awesome.
always, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
And I think it's like important to know that like none of us here are perfect. Like I would say I'm still learning. How can I be more attentive during the Qurbana? What can I do while I participate? Like as a choir director, what kind of music do I choose that is holy and true and, you know, really worshiping and honoring the Lord? So we're still learning, and a big part of that is asking questions. So whatever you don't know, like you don't have to guess. We have so many beautiful resources that we can turn to, and I think sometimes our human minds, we just want answers, and it is impossible to know and try to understand who God of all of his wonder and might is. But to whatever we have, if we have the desire, I think that's all we need. If the Lord sees that desire and he understands where we're at, so he's willing to come meet us where we are. So I always think just be open, ask questions, you're okay.
I have three thoughts, I guess. Like one is kind of piggybacking off of what both you, Noah, and Sruthi had mentioned. But I often say this in confession, where I say like if you have difficulty paying attention in Qurbana, Qurbana is kind of built to be like pretty much like it's someone who has ADHD. It's like their dream, right? Because of just like how often things are just like changing. Like, you know, you say this one prayer, then a song happens, then a prayer happens, then the song happens, right? So it's like there's like always just this like movement, and it's a pretty quick movement.
You're saying it's like
So,
a Bollywood movie?
a little bit. There's sequences, you know, like there's different dance, and also sometimes with the music, you might think it's a Bollywood movie. Ooh. Anyhow, but
That shall be stricken from the record.
okay, probably for the best. Probably for the best. I mean, I saw something on Instagram and it was talking about like one of the tunes for Qurbana, and it used like a movie sequence, and it was just kind of, it was pretty funny. But and they meant it as it was a vibe, and it is a vibe. But anyhow, but my point being more so is that I think that if we get really frustrated by the fact that I'm not able to stay focused, that's not really helpful, right? So sometimes maybe what's more helpful is to say, like, if you notice yourself like losing attention, even myself, like I admit it, like sometimes I like zone out and you just kind of go on autopilot, and it happens. But because our Qurbana is this like you know, there's like a series of things happening, just hop back on, right? Just hop back on, get back on attention. So it's like there's something kind of neat about that. That's like you go from like this song to this song to this prayer to this song to this prayer, then like you kind of keep going. So the quick transitions I think help in that way. The second thing that I think is very helpful, at least for me, and this is speaking from my own experience, is I started going to daily mass when I was in 10th grade, right? So when I started going in 10th grade, that was a new experience for me to go daily. But what I've come to find is that even in the repetition, right, there's a greater depth that happens there too, right? So you hear these things, you might hear them year after year or every couple of years or what have you, but somehow like when I hear that reading or that prayer again, there is like in that same moment like countless experiences all just kind of flood back with that one reading or with that one prayer or that one feast or that one whatever, right? And like and it all becomes like ever present to you at the same time. And so I think there is a deepening, because then like the next time you hear it, it's like, wow, I remember when I heard that reading here, or when I hear that, or that, like, so I think there is like a certain level of like in our like it's we're not just confined to like this one experience of Kurbana. Like if we're really meeting the Lord who is the beginning and the end and of all eternity, even our own memories, right, can all flood back if we allow it to, right, in that same space or that same point in space. And the third thing is that a friend of mine was talking not too long ago, and he had read something that just I was like, just arrested me, where he said that um, we have to ask ourselves like, what is like the deepest existential questions that we have, right? Our deepest desire, our deepest longing. Who are we? And once we kind of know what are these like deep questions, then go to the liturgy, because in the liturgy is like centuries, millennia's, right, of this prayer that really speaks to the deepest longing of the human heart, the cry out to God that has been just prayed by generations upon generations. And so if we're really like attentive or primed to think about those existential questions, we actually start to find the answer or the residences as we pray. But if we're not primed to it, it just becomes a pageantry, right? It becomes a ceremony.
That is incredible advice right there. Also because it's Jesus and he's the resurrection and the life. And when we go to him with those deep questions, like that's where we find our answer in him. No, that's amazing. You guys all said really great stuff. So maybe the only thing I would add from my side is so distractions, as you rightly pointed out, are completely normal and human. And getting frustrated about our distractions can be a greater distraction that can actually take us away from, the Lord's presence, rather than just being kind of lighthearted about it in the sense of, oh, whoops, bring our attention back. And the same could apply when there's distractions caused by the congregation. Like as a priest, if things are going wrong, I mean, choir's off key, they're singing the entire song off key, whatever. It's just, I'm a person with a little musical background too. So for me, I'm just like, I don't know if I can, it's like a drill going into your brain, but you kind of have to laugh it off. That's what I've realized. You have to sort of laugh, especially as a priest, if you try to control everything, you'll get distracted yourself. You just kind of laugh and give it to God. But I want to distinguish between being distracted here and there and stuff like that, and where you notice for a period of time that you're going to the Eucharist, you're going to the liturgy, but it's just becoming a routine, and that's not the same as a distraction. It's like, and that could give us pause. And of course it might happen a day or whatever. I mean, but if you notice that over a period of time, then it's helpful to reflect and say, Lord, what's going on there? And not in an accusatory way towards oneself, but just like, Lord, help me to see what's happening here. And how can I fan the flame of devotion, right? One way is certainly by what Father Joby just proposed, getting in touch with the existential deep questions that are already within us, but it's just that we have to be in touch with them. The other is by, most importantly, I would say by prayer, right? Daily prayer, because liturgy and prayer have to go hand in hand. They're both mutually enriching. And then also some spiritual reading. Like we've been reading St. Ephrem, and, it's just these saints have written these things, or the Holy Spirit has inspired them to precisely to fan the flame of devotion in the hearts of believers, So we take advantage, as I think one of you pointed out, we take advantage of all that's out there, the tools that are out there, the resources that are out there, to fan the flame of our devotion, of our faith, so that we can enter ever more deeply into the Eucharistic mystery. Well, this has been a lot of fun. This is awesome. And I got to admit, listening to you guys at one point, I thought, Father Joby and I, we should probably just get off this thing. Let these guys
Sign
do
off
the rest
now.
of it. So yeah, thank you both, Sruthi and Noah, for being here. And yeah, so Father Joby, I guess we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the In Spirit podcast. In Spirit is an initiative of Amoris Christi, an apostolate dedicated to lay spiritual formation. For more information and to keep up to date, you can visit our website at amorischristi.org and follow us on social media.